If you are struggling with starting your podcast, this is your problem. Welcome back to another episode of the Hello Sis Dorsey podcast. I'm so happy to have you on today. Today, I'm going to talk about reasons why people struggle with starting a podcast. And this may be you, this may not be you, but starting a podcast definitely have to have a why behind it. And the number one reason is there's no objective. There's no reason why you want to start a podcast. You see other people having a podcast and it looks great, looks polished, looks successful, and you're like, yeah, I can do it. But the problem is there is no why behind starting your podcast. Some people say, well, I want to use podcasts to monetize. I want to do it to have some sort of lead magnet. A lot of my students have a podcast so that they can have a resource to refer their clients or their customers to so they can get the answers. Like if they have questions or if there are questions that you hear over and over from your clients, students, or whatever you're doing in your business, you can definitely have a podcast answering those questions and just say, hey, go to episode number 80 or go to episode number 120. And that is where I actually answer question in full detail, full episode, all good stuff. Okay. So, no matter what, you have to get clear on your why for starting a podcast. Okay. You also have to ask yourself, what is the goal here? What's the end goal? What's the beginning goal? What are you trying to achieve when you're starting your podcast? And what is your objective? Okay. So when I started off, my goal was to have a conversation with authors because I had a blog. Some of you may know the story. I had a blog where I promoted other authors on my blog and I used to do book blog tours and everything. I'm an author, by the way. I wrote my book in 2010 and then I wrote a few little books after that, a few novels after that. And I just got immersed into the self-publishing world and just love the world so much. I love promoting other authors on my blog. We'll do author interviews. I'll showcase their book. It was a lot of fun, but the problem was it's like I send them an email and then I say, okay, send me your interview questions, the answer to your interview questions by the date. And then we will like have like a 3-day book blog tour. And then that's when they would tell their audience, hey, here's my tour stops. Go to this particular blog on this day. We're going to go to this particular blog. So it was fun. It was definitely fun. But I like to have the conversations. Like I like to actually sit and talk to people. I don't know if you've been in any of my challenges, workshops, or any of my Facebook lives or anything, but I love to talk. That wasn't always the case, but as I got older, I definitely love to talk. So I wanted to have a conversation with these people. I wanted to like dive deep into the real reason why they wrote the book or the real reason why they created these great characters in their book. So that was my goal. That was my objective. I wanted to just have a conversation. It wasn't to create ads. It wasn't to monetize my podcast. I really didn't understand that part until later on, until I had my podcast. I'm like, oh, I can monetize this. Okay. And I hear people making money off their podcasts all the time when they have like a big, huge audience. That's fine and dandy. But I just wanted to have a conversation. And I wasn't big on like hitting big, audacious numbers and big listeners. I'm like, hey, if I have 10 listeners listen to my podcast, I'm totally okay with that because those 10 listeners are coming back and listening for more. Okay. I definitely do say that you need a call to action. Have your listeners do something right after the podcast episode. That's always helpful. But if you want to just have a podcast like a true crime podcast or have a podcast where you talk about Disney, I see that a lot. Have a podcast where you talk about cats or, cat videos. This is the cat video podcast. Um, but just have fun with it. Like I see listen and see a lot of fun podcasts and people listen to it, and it doesn't have to be serious all the time. You can be creative with your podcast as long as you have listeners. You can actually, if you like, well, I don't want to do YouTube videos, but I do want to do something every day um, to talk to people. You can just do a daily podcast and share your opinions, share gas, and just have a conversation over coffee. I love those type of podcasts. It's just laid back, conversational, and that is totally the key. Do you? So, what is your objective? What is your why? What is your goal for starting a podcast? Do you have topics related to the content that you can talk about for at least a year? So, I see a lot of people starting their podcasts and they don't keep the momentum going. Like they have like maybe 4 or 5 episodes and then they stop. um, that's a that's definitely a sign that you don't know what you're doing this for, or because you got busy. You definitely have to have the drive for this. This content is a long game type of thing. It's not a social media platform. It is definitely not. This is a content that has a longer shelf life, and that's the reason why I love podcasting because I can have somebody 5 years down the line, find my podcast and then just say, "Oh, this is cool. This is interesting," and start listening to all my episodes. So it's the evergreen content that lasts. And that's exactly what I teach when I do my challenges and boot camps. I teach them and let them know this is content that can last. So definitely hone in on this type of content because you'll have a longer shelf life and you don't have to worry about the algorithms switching up and, doing all kind of weird things. So definitely think about it. I am a firm believer of having a podcast. It is so much fun. I love having guests on, and it's just a great way to offer your service, your products, and the things you have in your business. Okay. So, with that being said, if you're a coach, consultant, course creator, or service provider, and you want to launch your podcast and grow your business, your audience, and amplify your message, I have a podcast launch guide that will help you set the tone and foundation for your podcast. So I will link that up in the show notes below. And definitely download that, get started. This is really good for service providers as well. I mean, if you don't like doing cold calling, I would definitely say start a podcast because at least your potential clients out there can actually listen to you and see what you're all about. You can teach on here. And it's just a great way for them to learn more about you, connect with you, and actually want to book a call with you. So definitely download that podcast launch guide and get started with your podcast today. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's not a whole lot of equipment like people think that it is. And it's just a great way to connect with your audience and gain visibility and get more listeners for your podcast. So I hope this episode was helpful. And I'm so happy to have you listen on today. And if you like this episode, go ahead and give me a review. Leave a review and let me know how you like this episode. Or you can take a snapshot of this episode wherever you're listening. And you can tag me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is CSDorsey _ hello. Take care and you have a wonderful day. Bye.